Salutations and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kodology and I make videos about everything and anything to do with modern society. So without any further ado, let's get into this video. Tinder was founded by a group of rich boys and the girlfriend of one of these rich boys, 4 rich boys and girls. Described by Rolling Stone as a sheltered rich kid, one of Tinder's masterminds, Sean Rad, had intended the dating site to cater to a particular demographic. Tinder's original target demographics were those lucky few who had gotten into the most exclusive sorority houses, key influences in Greek life, socialites and celebutantes, models, and, as one Tinder employee put it in 2014, high-quality people. The principle was that popular people would help Tinder be perceived as not just another dating app for losers. It was helping hot people who could already get dates get even better dates. There are some important facts about Tinder that ought to be kept in mind whilst getting into this video. Firstly, the number of women using Tinder has rapidly and dramatically decreased over the years. In 2014, 40% of Tinder users in the United States were female. As of 2022, a mere 21.9% of users are female in the United States. And in the UK, the divide is even more dramatic, with a male to female ratio of 9:1. Secondly, 95% of Tinder users met their match within the first few days of using it. At first glance, this seems incredible, but things are not always as they seem. This high percentage only applies to those who have matched with somebody else on Tinder. That is, the feeling is mutual, and one of the two parties initiates virtual and eventual in-person contact. The reality of Tinder is that while the average woman will have enough matches, the average man has, quite literally, no matches on Tinder. Statistics show that when men do get a match on Tinder, the competition actually gets harder rather than easier. The likelihood of a woman you've matched with actually responding to a message is significantly low. And another important point to consider is that, in general, college-age individuals in modern societies are having significantly less sex. And what is interesting is that this doesn't seem to correlate with their significant Tinder and dating app usage. Whilst having substantially less sex, young people are spending more and more time on these apps, which allegedly are meant to result in sex. The mismatch here shows a rather sad picture of things. An overwhelming majority of college students claim to be using Tinder and dating apps not in order to hook up or not in order to find a relationship, but merely as a form of esteem-boosting procrastination. So, the vast majority of people on these apps are using them as a form of confidence boosting. This represents what these apps are. You are obliged to use them because everybody else is using them, but most people don't really want to be there. Their participation is obligatory, like how one is obliged to participate in the market economy at large. If you want so much as a chance at meeting people in the real world, it is not enough to go out into the real world anymore. The less scenic route of Tinder is the way to go. With this in mind, connections and correlations can be made between Tinder's perceived influence over the partnership prospects of young people, as well as how Tinder and dating apps in general create this illusion of choice, which is just that, an illusion. As the most frequented dating app, Tinder is having a substantial impact on the way young people are interacting with one another on a socio-economic and political level. It isn't that dating apps have increased possibilities at all, not even for its female users who seemingly have 9 men competing for their attention. Rather, everyday life hierarchies of status, particularly class status, have gone virtual in a way never seen before. The terms and conditions of the modern sexual marketplace is dictated by dating apps such as Tinder, and like all mammoths in the marketplace, substantial imbalances have been made and solidified on the basis of keeping as many people as possible from leaving the market. What Tinder's algorithm has successfully done is gotten rid of a key aspect of adulthood and growing up, which people people prior to the advent of the dating app era were clearly exposed to: scarcity, associated primarily with women, and rejection, associated primarily with men. Concurrently, Tinder has created this illusion of plenty and choice. Tinder has a total of 66 million users as of 2022. Most of these users are men competing with one another for the attention of a comparatively molecular pool of women. Yet swiping through Tinder as a male gives you a completely different impression and idea of the likelihood, or rather the unlikelihood, of making a match. And with women, the story is initially the same, but eventually it's very similar. Although there are considerably more men on Tinder than women, creating the illusion that there is far more choice and option for women, this really is not the case. 78% of the females on Tinder, that is the vast majority of the small pool of women who are actually on Tinder, are vying for the attention of only 20% of these men. To repeat, 78% of the small pool of women on Tinder are only interested in matching with 20% of men who use Tinder. In essence, 80% of Tinder's female users are competing for the attention and are only interested in matching with 20% of men on Tinder. Both sexes are at odds, but for very different reasons and with very different outcomes. And this is why I would argue that Tinder reinforces a very interesting and new form of class struggle. Statistically, there is more inequality on Tinder than 95% of national economies worldwide. There are only 9 countries with worse inequality in distribution and outcome of that distribution than Tinder. And this is disproportionately affecting Gen Z and millennials, who make up the largest chunk of the Tinder sphere. What is important here is to identify who wins on Tinder. It's obvious who the losers are, namely the 80% of men whom women are not interested in at all, and the 22 or so percent of women who are not of interest to any of the men. As well as, you could say, the majority of women on Tinder receiving attention from men whom they have no interest in. The winners of Tinder mirror socioeconomic and geosocial inequalities very interestingly. The meager 20% of attractive men and the few attractive women able to outdo the rest are the true winners of Tinder's brutal sexual market. But even more interestingly, it is obvious that once the 80% of undesirable men are done away with, suddenly the tables have turned. A substantially higher percentage of women are competing for the attention of a minuscule pool of men. And overall, the objective of Tinder is to keep you hooked via a highly intelligent and ever-learning algorithm coupled with bots intended to give you, specifically men, that essential hit of dopamine and confidence. A study was conducted by a blog called The Worst Online Data, and they found some very interesting and rather harrowing findings. Whilst an attractive man on Tinder will match 22.6% of the time, and if he is 34 and above, a whooping 42% of the time, the majority of men will only match a mere 0.5% of the time, meaning that in a bid to get a single match, the average Joe has to swipe right 200 times, and this doesn't even include race, because Tinder is very secretive about that. The common perception is that young men on Tinder just want casual sex and only care about looks. This, to an extent, is true. However, everything is more nuanced, and the extreme difficulty of a young man matching with someone on the app denotes a logical inference. The more you swipe right, the ever more likely you are to match with one. Research from the University of North Texas shows that men who use Tinder have significantly lower self-esteem, yet the app induces you to keep swiping and to keep using it because apparently it is going to boost your confidence place and is the most logical step towards prospective intimacy. The thing is that the rest of the world is not like the handful of individuals who get the most swipes right and likes on Tinder. They are not like Tinder's founders, who are billionaires. These individuals have noticeable characteristics in common. They are perceived to be high value. They are clearly overtly attractive. They are young if they are female. If they are male, they are tall. If they are men, they are a little bit older because this represents maturity and stability. Or they are able to offset any of these which they do not have by having a lot of money. The founders of Tinder had one objective. Their objective was to make money via crafting a dating app for the young elite to enjoy the fruits of this century's sexual autonomy. In crude terms, they were upper-class entrepreneurs trying to bring the sex revolution to a digital sphere exclusively for high-quality people. Yet, like most of Silicon Valley's finest, real-world socio-economic and political factors are deemed irrelevant when it comes to possibly impacting or having a negative impact on what their vision is or is likely going to result in. Take, for instance, the fact that 78% of women are competing for the attention of 20% of men. This isn't exclusively to do with evolutionary psychology, but I would argue that it has to do with these main socio-economic facts of life in the modern world. Firstly, young women are better and higher educated than young men. And secondly, young women between the ages of 22 and 29 also typically earn more than young men. Inevitably, and factoring in the faster maturity of young females, as well as hypergamy, and how that has played a role in evolutionary biology. The more educated, professional, and successful a woman is, the stronger preference she will have for a mate that will either meet, but particularly who will surpass her high threshold. Tinder is also exclusively based on a single factor, the photo. If you're attractive, what you say in your bio has no impact on whether most people swipe right or left. This is especially the case with men. The opposite is not true. An inevitable factor or feature of photographs is that, particularly for women, they reinforce ideals and the substantial place which objectification plays in society. And this immediately jars with the fact that young women are increasingly better educated and are, at least socioeconomically, outperforming or competing on the same playing field as men. Modern women increasingly want to, and in my opinion rightly so, want to be valued for more than just their physicality, their looks, their youthfulness and attractiveness. But this is a key biological and evolutionary factor, which simply is. Tinder, however, exacerbates this on a level that is not biological and that is not at all natural. In selecting women, men prioritize appearance and youthfulness, which has been unnaturally proliferated and prioritized by dating apps. Young men's exposure to such an abundance of young, attractive women is not only unnatural, but has skillfully taken advantage of, and likely is damaging the still developing psyche of men in ways that only time will tell. Tinder's algorithm quickly taps into what you, especially as a male, like, and inundates you with similar profiles, many of them bots. And it is this inundation which keeps you hooked even when you are faced with systematic rejection. Who cares about rejection when there are so many other women out there, or so many prospective women out there? The math is simple, but dismal. Successful and attractive men are a substantial minority. And as the education levels and earning prospects of women increase, these men are more highly sought after than they have ever been in human history. Importantly, these men do not experience that all essential characteristic of adulthood and of growing up, especially for men, which is rejection. And this doesn't mean that this rejection just doesn't exist. Instead, it is heightened and placed even more so to an unnatural extent on the 80% of men who are considered average. They do not experience rejection on the same level as 80% of the male population in life or in love, and their advantageous position only makes them more territorial and protective over their assets and their status. In the United States, only 13% of men have an annual income exceeding $100,000. Only 14.5% are 6 foot and above, and only 10% have a six-pack. Not even a whole percentage point of US men possess all three of these characteristics, which in the eyes of the modern woman and on the domain of these dating apps, make them attractive and increase their success level. The nascent decline in marriage has been attributed to a putative shortage of economically attractive partners for unmarried women. Using dating apps like Tinder is also having real-world implications. And this is because these dating apps have very suddenly and without any regulation or foresight become the starting point for forming real-world relationships and connections. Access to sex is also increasingly being dictated by these apps. And as I've said, interestingly enough, less people are having sex and less people are using the likes of Tinder and other hookup dating apps for sex. Tinder's algorithm, which is at its core a vast voting system, equates desirability to likes. A man's desirability on Tinder is based exclusively on accruing likes from higher value women. It makes no difference if he gets likes from women who are considered of the 22% of, well, average, less successful women. Whilst men on Tinder like women's accounts 60% of the time, women only like men's accounts 4.5% of the time. The app only cares about one demographic, namely the demographic which Tinder's founders originally had in mind. The small pool of high-value men whom, at the end of the day, Tinder wants to keep swiping. And the only way that Tinder can keep these men swiping and can keep these men on their app is by inundating them with the profiles of attractive young women, and by inundating them with the attention of nearly 80% of Tinder's female users. And I would hazard that the same can be said for other apps which don't have this tagline of being merely about hookup culture. These apps emphasize and advertise the importance of finding the one, and there's also this illusion that there is plenty and that there is choice. So why settle when something better could be out there, when your true soulmate or the ideal woman could be out there? The confidence of this pool of high value men is exacerbated. Tinder superficially inflates their confidence, and this is in Tinder's best interest. I wouldn't say that any of this has to do with the obvious stereotypes that the modern woman is shallow, entitled, that the modern man, if he is not an alpha, is a loser or an incel, or that the attractive and rich, high-flying men are, well, fuckboys. The issue, I think, lies in the very economic principles of neoliberal market capitalism, which has artificially inflated many inequalities that we see in the real world. The rut is clear. Widening socioeconomic inequalities in the real world are not only mirrored on virtual apps, but are necessarily amplified by them in pursuit of profit. If inequalities are reduced or rectified, there is no money to be made. This all stems down to an existentially profound mass manipulation of the biological drives of men and women. especially to hypergamy, which has only been heightened by the clear mathematics and calculations which women and men have to do when navigating an app of some 66 million people. Dating apps damagingly aggravate two things: hypergamy in women and rejection in men. Regrettably, biology and survival have not factored in the complete morphing of scarcity into a domain of 66 million people. Modern dating, like the economy, creates a convincing illusion of plenty and autonomy. And increasingly, individuals are given more options and are sold these options on the pretense that this is something they have rationally chosen for themselves. The cultural battles we have with and against one another depict this perfectly. Women are entitled gold diggers, obsessed with looking like young girls and selling their sexuality on Instagram. Men are disgusting perverts who only watch pornography, which has a lot to do with everything I have relayed above. They only care about how a woman looks, and eventually will take the red pill if they don't get what they want. The inequalities on Tinder are not natural ones, but they have been purposefully designed that way, because that is why and how you keep swiping. You will keep losing, even though the only way you could possibly have a chance at winning is if you keep swiping, and everything is just reinforced in a cycle. Because ultimately, Tinder only cares about a certain and very insular group of individuals. It's 20% of high-value male patrons. And Tinder will go to dramatic lengths to make them feel happy, confident, and as if the app is working for them. Remember that the majority of young people use Tinder for confidence-boosting reasons, as a form of procrastination in this sense. Used in over 190 countries and boasting a net worth of $5 billion US, Tinder has a market value of $1.4 billion. Its founders, who have largely moved on from the company, have a net worth of over $2 billion. I can't say I'm terribly happy for them. What they have left for us is a petrifying reality that is seemingly out of our control, and that of governments lacking in the drive and power to do anything. A young population of lonely, childless women and negatively socialized and psychologically impacted, not to mention sexually frustrated men, whose respective lives are toyed and played with, all to appease a tiny minority of high-value men. And what is most frightening is that these respective groups are not battling the system or are pointing out those who are unnaturally gaining from it. They are essentially at odds and in conflict with one another. Welcome to sexual market liberalism. Thank you so much for watching this short video, and do stay tuned for my follow-up video on this, which I will be recording and putting out next month, which is going to be exclusively on sexual market liberalism, its founding, where it has gotten us to in the modern world. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoyed this video as well. And please share your opinions down below, and if you'd like to share your opinions with me privately, please send me an email. I will see you in the next one.